Welcome to the Telegraph Museum, Porthcurno. This is the story of how this tiny and beautiful valley on the far southwestern tip of the UK mainland became a hub of global communications. In the 1840s, the invention of the telegraph meant the speed it took to send messages was transformed from weeks and months to minutes and seconds. We're going to take you on a journey which spans the globe and over 100 years of history to discover how human ingenuity and endeavour paved the way for the gadgets and devices we all use and rely on today.
The scientists and engineers who worked on submarine optical cables were some of our best, some of the most recognisable names. Morse, Faraday, Kelvin, all contributed to the developments of submarine cable systems. And their work can directly be traced to the modern communication systems of today that underpin the internet.
In the 1870s, Porthcurno's first undersea telegraph cable was laid, connecting Cornwall with India, a distance of about 5,000 miles.
Telegrams passed through Porthcurno from places from all over the world. Porthcurno was a relay station. It fed the messages on to places like London and elsewhere. At first, the messages were taken by hand. That is, until William Thomson invented the siphon galvanometer or the siphon recorder. And this produced a written ink record, a squiggly ink line representing dots and dashes, which could then be interpreted by telegraph operators.
As the telegraph grew in importance, young men came to Porthcurno to train as telegraph operators. In 1911, one of these students was Alfred Izzard from Dulwich in London.
My hours, I find, are from 12 o'clock midday to 8 o'clock with 20 minutes off for tea, making 7 hours, 40 minutes work. This gives me the morning from breakfast time to 11:30, when I come in for lunch, to myself.
At the start of the First World War in 1914, one of Britain's first acts of aggression was to cut Germany's undersea telegraph cables to give Allied forces a massive tactical advantage. At the same time, troops were sent to Porthcurno to protect the telegraph station, and telegraphers ordered to remain in West Cornwall to continue their essential duties. Some of the first trainees from Porthcurno were sent overseas. Alfred Izzard was stationed in the Mediterranean, maintaining the undersea cable network which helped Britain keep in contact with her allies.
Friday, November the 19th, 1915. We are leaving Gib with 160 miles of cable on board, including 70 miles of the Spanish government cable. Owing to the considerable activity of enemy submarines in the Mediterranean, we're steering on a special and secret course.
By the 1920s, Porthcurno was the largest telegraph station in the world. 14 cables landed here from all over the globe. In the winter months, you can often see some of them on the beach as the seasonal rainfall and storms expose them to the elements. Since the war, technology had moved on. A new automated system for relaying messages between telegraph stations known as regen was developed, but this had a human cost.
The 1920s were a very busy period for people here at Porthcurno, but because of the development of automated technologies, many hundreds of telegraph workers at other parts of the world were no longer required. So there was no need for a training college, and the college closed and much of the staff quarters went into disrepair.
' 1939 saw the return of troops to Porthcurno with the outbreak of the Second World War. No chances were taken in the protection of the telegraph station, with heavy fortification in the valley. This fascinating chapter in our history is told in the bomb-proof tunnels which were cut out of the hillside. After the war, the school was reopened to train telegraph engineers. One of the young men who came to study here was John Packer.
Hey, Fred. I've got Barbados.
I arrived by steam train. It took a very long time. By the time we got into Cornwall, it was already dark. And then there was the long drive through ever-narrowing country lanes to this remote valley. Couldn't see very much because it was dark. And then awakening the first morning here, and the scenery, which was quite unlike anything I had known in Sussex. Jagged rocks instead of the smooth South Downs, a lovely sandy beach, beautiful views across the valley, and palm trees everywhere. And I wasn't used to that in Sussex.
By the 1970s, the telegraph had become obsolete and was replaced by new technologies, including fibre optics and satellite. The training school remained open until 1993, running telecommunications courses in the new technologies, welcoming students from all over the world. Former student John Packer returned to lecture at the college.
The sort of equipment I learned back in '54 was this sort of stuff. 25 years later, these were museum pieces, and the idea was to bring engineers back from the field, bringing with them to the college the latest information, the latest engineering practices and so on. The ethos of the college was always to combine theory with the latest practical knowledge.
Now, in the 21st century, modern communications technology, which has its roots in the Porthcurno Valley, is part of our everyday lives. And that's thanks in part to those early global communications pioneers who came to live and work here.
Today, Cornwall is still the hub of communications for this country. 14 cables come ashore on the beaches of Cornwall at Bude, Sennen Cove, the Lizards, and of course here at Porthcurno. These are now fibre optic cables. They carry messages, telephone messages, but email, internet, the World Wide Web. Without them, the World Wide Web would be a shadow of what it is now.
The growth of the internet has fueled the demand for data. Data is growing at some 40% a year. Optical fibres, which were initially thought to have limitless capacity, are now running out of capacity. We now, just like those Victorian pioneers, we now need to find new techniques, to be fearless in our search for new technologies to unlock the capacity of optical communications for the future.
Today, the museum is here to tell the fascinating story of telegraphy and the people who made our modern communications possible. We hope you enjoy your visit.